The Gift by Jansen Davies. Chapter 1. The Clearing. Rachel Morel exhaled slowly, watching her breath twist into fog and disappear into the crisp mountain air. The forest was blanketed in white. Snow clung to pine boughs like icing, and the hush of late afternoon settled over the clearing like a lullaby. She had pitched her tent on a patch of flat earth and coaxed a fire to life with practiced hands. The scent of wood smoke, mingled with pine, wrapped around her like a comfort she'd long come to crave. Solitude. That was her rhythm, her pulse. Not the bustle of Manhattan with its steel towers and endless buzz of people, but this, where sound had space to echo and thoughts could bloom without interruption. She checked the perimeter of her camp, made sure the firewood stack was dry and accessible, then sat cross-legged on a weathered tarp near the flames, pulling her coat tighter against the cold. The trees whispered overhead. She was content. But contentment shattered with a sudden whoosh. The sound wasn't wind, it was heavier, like air compressed and sliced all at once. Rachel jerked her head up, just in time to see a vessel break through the low cloud cover and descend. Sleek, silent, metallic. It landed not 30 feet from her tent, its undercarriage glowing faint blue as it settled onto the snow, disturbing not a single pine needle in its wake. Rachel's heart drummed in her ears. She didn't move, couldn't. Her mind scrabbled for logic. Experimental drone, government test flight, but it wasn't any shape she knew. No wingspan, no rotors, no sound now except her rapid breathing and the crackle of the fire behind her. The air shimmered, and a hatch slid open with elegant precision. 5 figures emerged, humanoid but unmistakably alien. Their limbs bent with subtle unfamiliarity. Their eyes glowed, softly bioluminescent like twilight in motion. But they didn't charge, didn't threaten. Instead, they raised their hands in a slow, universal gesture of peace. Then came the voice, not aloud, but inside her head. Gentle, warm, spoken without sound. "We mean no harm. Repairs required. May we share your fire?" Rachel's lips parted. She wanted to speak, but wasn't sure words would make it out. She nodded. The beings lowered themselves near her fire, their delicate hands stretched toward the flame, as if soaking in warmth for the first time. Above them, the stars blinked open, one by one, bearing witness. Chapter 2. Visitors from the Cold. Rachel couldn't move. The 5 beings stood at the edge of the firelight, their features softened by flickering flame and falling snow. They resembled humans in silhouette, 2 arms, 2 legs, upright posture, but everything else was uncanny. Their skin gleamed like oil slicks under moonlight, and their eyes glowed faintly, each a different hue, as if reflecting constellations she'd never seen before. One stepped forward, their apparent leader, slightly taller than the others with a calm gravity about him. His hands remained raised in a gesture of peace, but it was his voice, quiet, calm, resonant in her mind, that stilled her panic. "Your fire is life," he said silently. "We seek warmth while we mend the vessel." Rachel hesitated, words caught behind her teeth. But the fear that gripped her began to loosen. Something in his tone, more feeling than sound, reminded her of the soft trust shared between strangers who choose kindness over suspicion. She nodded slowly. The leader lowered his hands and gestured to his companions. They approached in deliberate, graceful movements and knelt beside the flames, their posture polite, reverent. One alien detached from the group and returned to the ship. He opened an unseen panel and began to work, tools gliding into place as though summoned by thought, lights blinking in quiet constellations across the hull. Rachel sat opposite the strangers, arms crossed tightly around herself, heart still pounding. Silence lingered, pierced only by the hiss of the fire and the distant hum of alien technology. Then the leader turned toward her again. You are alone? He asked. Rachel hesitated, unsure how to answer. She nodded. By choice? He added. She gave a small shrug. I guess. The leader seemed to pause in thought. There was no judgment in his tone, only curiosity laced with something almost tender. We do not understand solitude. It does not exist among our kind. The others nodded softly, their eyes reflecting firelight and snowfall. Rachel bit her lip, watching them, wondering what it must be like to never be alone, never ache in silence, never crave distance and space. It is not weakness, the leader said gently, only unfamiliar. Rachel blinked. That, somehow, was the first thing anyone had said to her in a long time that felt like it truly saw her. Chapter 3. Stories Across Stars. As the fire crackled softly, casting shadows that danced across the aliens' faces, Rachel found herself watching them, not with fear, but fascination. They did not speak aloud, yet their expressions, so subtly readable, hinted at joy, curiosity, and something like reverence for the moment. The leader, Oran, turned to her again. His telepathic voice was steady and warm. Your world is young and full of noise. We have come to understand it. Rachel tilted her head. Understand it? How? Oren gestured toward the spacecraft where the sixth alien worked methodically on the hull. Pulses of soft light glowed beneath his fingers as tools hovered and adjusted with precision no human mechanic could match. We are chronists, Oran explained. We collect, record, preserve the rise of minds and cultures across the stars. Yours is a world reaching outward, but fragile, contradictory. Another alien leaned forward, adding in a softer mental pulse. We gather data, samples, fragments of thought, art, and story. It helps our kind learn from civilizations before they change or disappear. Rachel felt a chill unrelated to the snow. You think we'll disappear? Oren did not answer immediately. Instead, he studied the fire's embers as if they held truth. Many burn bright, fewer endure, but your kind loves fiercely, and that holds power. She wasn't sure how to respond. It felt as though she were speaking with historians who had lived through the births and deaths of countless societies, chronicling each one with care and melancholy awe. She stood and opened her backpack, rummaging through a tin of canned goods. Have you eaten human food before? She asked, unsure how absurd that sounded. One of the smaller aliens perked up, almost bouncing in place. Not directly. Simulations only. Real food is rare. Rachel chuckled, holding up 2 cans. Then you're in for a treat. She set to work, heating beef stew and chili over the fire, using iron pans she'd inherited from her grandfather. As the savory scent filled the clearing, the aliens leaned forward with visible excitement. One inhaled dramatically and mimicked a sigh. She served them each a small portion and watched in quiet amazement as they tasted the food, chewing slowly with exaggerated delight. Oren gave a respectful nod after his first bite. Generosity and sustenance shared by flame. That is a sacred ritual in many worlds. Rachel smiled. It's called camping here. Laughter, not voiced but felt, shimmered through the group like a ripple in still water. The stars above twinkled brighter now, and Rachel realized something profound had shifted. She wasn't just feeding strangers. She was feeding a story, one they'd carry across galaxies. Chapter 4. A World Apart. As the fire dimmed into a bed of glowing embers, Rachel passed the final spoonful of chili to the smallest alien, who took it with childlike delight. The snow fell gently around them now, softening the edges of reality, an almost dreamlike tranquility. Oren watched her closely, not in the way humans did, with judgment or scrutiny, but with true interest. appreciation. "You have no mate?" he asked. "No," Rachel replied. "I've never wanted one." He blinked slowly, processing. "And no children?" "No," she said again, wrapping her arms around her knees. "It's just me." She waited for the usual pity, the awkward pause. But instead, Oren turned to his companions and shared the thought. A hum of gentle confusion rippled through them. "Solitary existence," one murmured in her mind. "Anomaly. Loneliness by choice," another added. "Unfathomable." Rachel felt exposed, like her solitude was being measured and dissected. Yet, Oran's next thought surprised her. "We do not judge, we seek understanding." She relaxed slightly. "I guess I've always liked being alone. It's peaceful, predictable." The aliens exchanged silent glances. Finally, Oren leaned forward, firelight flickering across his face. "On our world, every birth binds three: the child, the parent, and the chosen elder who will guide them. Family is not option. It is architecture." Rachel considered that. An entire civilization shaped by connection. Her life felt suddenly brittle in comparison, like a snowflake beside a star. "What happens to someone who wishes to live alone?" she asked. There was a pause. Then Oren replied, "We do not understand the wish. It is never spoken." A lump formed in her throat. She looked away. "Guess I'm the strange one here." To her surprise, Oren reached out, not with a hand but with presence. "Not strange, rare. Rarity holds value." The fire popped softly. The night pressed closer, and Rachel sat with beings older than she could fathom, feeling seen in a way she hadn't expected. A strange warmth bloomed in her chest. It wasn't just from the fire. Chapter 5. Farewell Gift. The spacecraft pulsed with energy as the final repairs were completed. Lights along its hull shimmered and shifted, like constellations rearranging themselves in real time. The alien technician rejoined the others by the fire, nodding wordlessly. Rachel felt a curious mixture of relief and loss. The encounter had been brief, surreal, and somehow grounding. She'd spent her entire life mastering the art of isolation, but in the past few hours she had been anything but alone. Oren stood, the others following his lead. "Gratitude," he projected, "for warmth, for kindness, for nourishment. We return to sky." Rachel rose as well, unsure how one says goodbye to creatures from another star. She offered a small wave, then stopped herself. Was that too human? One of the younger aliens mimicked the gesture with a kind of delighted elegance. The group turned to board the vessel, their silhouettes illuminated briefly by the interior's pale glow. Oren paused just before stepping inside. "You have given freely," he said. "In our tradition, hospitality demands reciprocation. We leave you a gift." The hatch sealed behind him, and without sound or heat, the ship rose into the dark canopy of sky. Snowflakes stirred gently in its wake, then settled once more in the silence. Rachel stared upward for a long time, fire forgotten. Then a sound, soft, irregular, cut through the night. A strange gurgling. Cautiously, Rachel turned toward her tent. Her boots crunched over the frost, each step tentative, deliberate. She pulled back the flap and stopped. Inside, nestled among her blankets and gear, sat a small creature, an alien child. Its skin shimmered softly, its eyes too large, too deep, yet somehow vulnerable. The child looked up and cooed, a string of unformed syllables, neither human nor fully foreign. It crawled toward her slowly, arms reaching out, voice filled with curiosity and affection. Rachel knelt down, instincts awakening faster than her thoughts. She wrapped the child in one of her thermal blankets and held it close. Its body was warm, impossibly so, and it settled against her chest as though it had always belonged there. She didn't move for a long time. Should she report it? Hand it over? Surely someone, some government or scientist, would know what to do. But she didn't call, didn't run. She whispered the name. Oliver. The child blinked, his eyes reflecting firelight. Rachel had never asked for company, never wished for family. But now, alone beneath the stars, she held the beginning of something terrifying and beautiful, and she couldn't let go. Chapter 6. Oliver. Rachel barely slept that night. She stayed curled beside the small alien child, listening to his quiet gurgles and occasional whirring sighs as he drifted in and out of sleep. He was peaceful, oddly so, and warmer than expected, radiating a subtle pulse like a heartbeat that resonated through the blanket wrapped around him. Come morning, the forest was bathed in soft golden light. Snow still blanketed the ground, but the air had shifted, charged now with something Rachel could only describe as presence. Everything felt like it was holding its breath. Oliver stirred, blinking slowly. His eyes were massive, reflecting everything with a silvery sheen. Firelight, trees, her face, her hesitation. He reached toward her, his fingers curling around her thumb with unmistakable intent. Rachel's instincts warred with logic. She could hike down the mountain and report him to a ranger station, say she'd found something, someone, unexplainable. Let experts take over, scientists, government agents, people who'd know exactly how to classify him, study him, contain him. But as she looked at him, skin like starlight, voice like a question, she couldn't. "You were given to me," she whispered. The words settled on the snow like a vow. She wrapped Oliver tighter in the blanket and began rearranging the camp with new purpose. She portioned out food, used the fire to warm water, and pulled out the old hat she'd stuffed in the bottom of her pack for emergencies. It was comically oversized for his little head, but it made her laugh, and Oliver echoed her laughter with soft clicks and huffs, a language still forming. She kept talking to him, pointing at objects. "Tent," she said. "Tree. Fire." He watched her intently, blinking slowly with each new sound, tilting his head just slightly, absorbing, mimicking. He tapped the fire pit gently and made a low whistle of recognition. Rachel paused. He was learning, and so was she. Later, she sat with Oliver cradled in her lap, watching the snowfall thicken again. She should have felt overwhelmed, terrified by the implications. But instead, a quiet resolve rose within her. This wasn't just a secret. It was a choice, a future, and maybe, for the first time, something bigger than her solitude. "You're not just the gift," she murmured. "You're the reason." Oliver cooed, pressing his forehead gently to hers. The fire crackled, the snow fell, and a bond unlike any Rachel had ever known began to form, unusual, untraceable, yet undeniably real. Chapter 7. Naming. The snow softened as afternoon gave way to a pearled twilight, casting long shadows between trees and tent poles. Rachel sat, wrapped in layers, Oliver nestled in a bundle across her lap. His warmth had become familiar now, a quiet pulse she'd grown to anticipate. Every sound he made, clicks, coos, musical exhales, was a fresh syllable in a language only she understood. She hadn't named him immediately. Something in her hesitated, as if naming the child would make him real in ways she wasn't yet ready for. But as she watched him trace her scarf's stitching with glowing fingertips and hum softly in response to her voice, the truth settled in her bones. He was already real. He was already hers. "I think your name should be Oliver," she whispered. The word hung in the frosted air, fragile but firm. Oliver blinked up at her, tilting his head. A ripple of soft light spread across his skin, like goosebumps answering a touch. "It's from a story I love," she said aloud, voice gentle. "A boy looking for more than the world gave him. But he found it eventually. Kindness, hope, belonging." Oliver pressed his forehead to her shoulder, releasing a sound like a cross between a sigh and a spark. Rachel smiled, tears misting her eyes. This was a moment she would carry always. Not the firelight, not the snow, but the naming. Names mattered. They gave shape to memory and root to love. "I'll help you find your more," she whispered. And with that, the forest exhaled again, as if relieved, one story ending, another quietly beginning. Chapter 8. Bonding. Rachel hadn't planned for this life. Her days once revolved around deadlines and solitude, curated silences and predictable routines. But now each morning began with the soft sounds of Oliver stirring, his tiny limbs stretching like curled ribbons, his eyes blinking with galaxy-like curiosity. He learned quickly. By the end of the first week, he could mimic simple gestures, pointing, waving, tapping objects with intention. Rachel began introducing words, slowly, patiently: cup, tree, sky. And Oliver responded, not always with sound, but expression, tilting his head, glowing faintly, emitting pulses of light when he grasped a new idea. He favored warmth, blankets, sunlight, steaming broth, and nestled against her often, humming contentedly. Rachel found herself narrating everything, building a world through language he could borrow piece by piece. They read together. She dug out her favorite books: The Little Prince, Oliver Twist, a dog-eared collection of poetry. Oliver listened, his attention rapt, occasionally mimicking her page turns, sometimes cooing at specific sentences as if the rhythm pleased him. And there were laughs. One morning, after Rachel prepared oatmeal, Oliver sneezed dramatically, sending a faint ripple of light across the kitchen. They both froze. Then Rachel burst out laughing, and Oliver echoed her with a chirping trill that sounded almost mischievous. They discovered their rhythm, not mother and child in the traditional sense, but something older, softer, a shared language built not from biology but choice, compassion, and quiet grace. Rachel took walks with him nestled in her pack, bundled in scarves and coats. In the forest, she pointed at birds, taught him the rustle of leaves and the hush of snowfall. He responded with wonder, always wonder. Her world had narrowed once out of necessity, but now each day expanded, layered with new sounds, new meanings, new stars. She still hadn't told anyone, still hadn't reached out, but she knew now this wasn't just a detour. It was her purpose unfolding. "We're a story no one's ready for," she whispered one night, watching Oliver drift to sleep beside the fire. "But someday they'll understand." And when she closed her eyes, she did not dream of silence. She dreamed of stars, of Oliver's laugh, of a future growing gently toward the light. Chapter 9. The Choice. Spring crept softly into the forest. The snow had melted into rich, damp earth, and green threaded its way across the landscape like an old promise returning. In the cabin she had built from salvaged wood and quiet ambition, Rachel stirred oatmeal on the stove while Oliver sat nearby, stacking pine cones and humming an eerie, melodic phrase that sounded like a lullaby from some forgotten star. He had grown, noticeably, but not in human increments. Some days he seemed nearly toddler-like, clumsy and bright-eyed. Others he spoke in pulses of telepathic color and nested meaning she could only begin to interpret. Each morning brought a fresh surprise. His skin shimmered differently in humidity, his eyes refracted shapes she couldn't trace. He danced sometimes with movements that flickered just beyond normal speed. Rachel documented these things carefully in a notebook she kept beneath her mattress. But what she didn't write down, couldn't write down, was how deeply he had reshaped her. Her solitude, once a fortress, had become a garden. Her routines, once rituals of avoidance, had bloomed into a living rhythm. She wasn't just protecting Oliver. She was becoming someone else through him, softer, sharper, more alive. And yet the world beyond her clearing still loomed. She'd thought often about reporting him. The nearby university had a stellar xenobiology program. Her editor knew scientists in biotech who would give anything to study extraterrestrial life firsthand. She could drop a note anonymously, leave him somewhere safe, say nothing more. But every time the thought came, it unraveled at the sight of Oliver curled against her side, whispering colors into her dreams. He was more than evidence, more than an anomaly. He was her choice. One night, Rachel sat beneath the stars, Oliver nestled beside her in a bundle of blankets. The forest buzzed with insects and distant owl calls. She turned to him. "I don't know what the world would do with you," she said quietly, "but I know what I'd do without you, and that's the only answer I need." Oliver reached out and touched her cheek, one glowing finger, warm and deliberate. It was not just affection, it was agreement. Rachel exhaled. The last of the guilt left her breath in a plume of steam. She had chosen not to be alone once, and now she chose to remain not alone. Not because she was afraid of the world, but because this story was hers to protect until the world was ready. Chapter 10. The Future. Years passed gently, like leaves changing color. Rachel's cabin had grown, modest additions built with care and secrecy. She planted a garden beneath the watchful trees, strung wire for solar panels, and painted the walls with constellations Oliver had drawn from memory. Inside, life was rhythm and ritual, morning oatmeal, walks through pine trails, stories told by firelight. Oliver, now taller than her shoulder, moved with graceful certainty. His features had softened into something between human and alien, angular in places, luminous in others. He rarely spoke in words, but his presence was articulate in other ways. He painted images Rachel couldn't interpret but somehow felt, and hummed sequences that sometimes made her cry, though she couldn't explain why. He was still a mystery, but he was hers, and she was his. One evening, as twilight painted the sky in shades of violet and indigo, they stood together outside the cabin. Oliver pointed toward a bright point above the horizon, one Rachel hadn't seen before. "Home," he said. The word was clear, spoken aloud. His voice, slightly resonant, carried the weight of knowledge and longing. Rachel stared at the star. Something in her chest tightened. But it wasn't fear. It was the ache of possibility. "Do you want to go back?" she asked. Oliver turned to her slowly and shook his head. Then he placed a hand on her shoulder, warm and deliberate. "This is home." Tears blurred her vision, but she smiled through them. They stood in silence, watching the stars emerge one by one. Rachel knew the world beyond her clearing would someday intrude. Satellites might glimpse the truth, strangers might ask questions, time might demand answers. But for now their story remained untouched. She had been given a gift, not an object, not a moment, but a life, and it had transformed everything. As night deepened, Oliver held her hand. Together they looked upward, not with fear, but with quiet anticipation, because in the silence between stars, some stories wait patiently to be told. Epilogue. The gift keeps giving. Long after the forest swallowed their secret into its roots and shadows, whispers began to surface in quiet corners of the world. A researcher at a university in upstate New York received an anonymous package. Inside, a series of crude drawings marked with patterns never before catalogued. She called them star maps, but none matched known constellations. A child in Oregon claimed to see someone in her dreams, a boy with shimmering skin who hummed stories instead of speaking. She drew him with uncanny precision. Her parents dismissed it, but she kept dreaming. And once, a hunter in northern Canada swore he saw a small figure walking beside a woman at dusk. Not human, not animal, just different. When he raised his scope, the figure vanished like fog. Rachel and Oliver never sought attention. Their story was never told on paper or screens. But still, something in the wind carried it. In their clearing, beneath a canopy of stars, life went on. Seasons cycled, books were read, meals were shared. Oliver grew into himself, and Rachel grew beside him, no longer an editor of other people's stories, but a guardian of her own. Years later, when a strange light pulsed through the sky and disappeared as quickly as it came, Oliver looked up and smiled. Rachel rested a hand on his shoulder. "They'll come back someday," she said. He nodded. "When the story's ready." And so, beneath a sky that remembered, two souls stayed rooted in a truth larger than language, that solitude is sometimes the soil where connection takes root, and that the rarest gifts are not given, but found. The end. Please like and subscribe for no other reason than as a gift.